Welcome to RB's Kitchen Talk. I want to say thank you to my guests for joining me, Evangelist Patrice Thomas. Thanks so
Hi.
much. And Elder Rodney McMillan. I'm delighted that you are here to talk to me about this really important topic, being properly aligned. And we also have another guest who will join us shortly, is my prayer. So, let's get started. Both of you have been on Kitchen Talk before, and so you kind of know what to expect. Let's dive right in. So, my question to you first is, why do you think so many people dive into relationships knowing they're not properly aligned? I mean, I couldn't help but ask that question because, it's real. So many folks are hooking up, and unfortunately they see the red flags, right? They decide that they're going to bypass all of what they said were non-negotiables, right? And they just charge right in. Why? Take your time.
Yeah, I go.
I think he kind of popped off. How
Oh,
could be?
Patrice, it looks like it's
So I think one of the things is when we talk about alignment or when we talk about being unequally yoked, I don't really think people really understand those terms. And I think that's one of the reasons why they jump in so quickly. We think a lot of times especially when we use the word unequally yoked, that always comes into the mind with believers and unbelievers. So we never take it further to say unequally yoked can mean a lot of different things. You can be unequally yoked and be in spiritual maturity and growth. We don't have to be on the same level. You can be unequally yoked with your calling and your purpose. Your calling and your purpose, it can be a different assignment than whoever it is that you're trying to enter into a relationship with. It. You might be ministry wise, and the person that you're entering into a relationship, it may not be different. That's
okay.
going to cause friction.
Yes. Hold on, real quick, because you taking some of my thunder away. Before you get there, why do you think people go ahead with it anyway?
I think we go with it a lot of times because we're elated with the ideal of getting in a relationship. Let's just be honest. A relationship is something as humans that we drive after. Relationship is being connected to someone. And I think there's an innate ability that we have that we want to be connected.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in any type of relationship, it brings about a connection, and we all have the desire to be connected. And I think what happens is we mostly focus on that point and we don't think beyond that.
Yeah, I'm with you right there. Rodney, you had some time to think about it as you were coming back on. So what do you
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that that's the way that God created us.
Mhm.
I believe He created us with that innate desire to commune. He wants that fellowship with us, and we want that fellowship with others. And I believe that's a very important part. Um, as far as when we're talking about being aligned, that's the beginning of it.
Mhm.
That's the beginning. And when you say, jumping right in, I think we don't understand what relationship is. I think we go in with an idea and what we've seen, but how many people have really sat down, I think, and been taught um, how to have a relationship and what a relationship consists of. These things people don't think about. We get our cues from our worldview, what we see and what we've heard. We parrot a lot of things, and it's because it sounds good and it's easy, But to have a relationship, and this goes, I mean, and I don't want to get ahead of, but it goes, along a lot of lines of being, having a relationship and being connected to someone and being aligned with that person. And that person, we are supposed to get our cues from, is Christ, our Father. And when we get that those cues there, then we're not going to have a problem, with a relationship, because it's divine, and things will work the way that they're supposed to. And so, I think this is a very complicated topic, you know, just looking at, micro segments of it, because it's very big.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so all right. So Pastor Tanya Collier, I'm so happy that you've joined us. So look, you said it's complicated, and I don't want to go too far, but ahead of the discussion, because I think there's so much meat for us to talk about here. But if we can, we like to, as Christians, and it's part of who we are, spiritualize so much. And
Yes.
and I think that if we could just for a moment just take that spiritual hat off and just think about what we do, how we do. We know all the right answers. We know what we're supposed to say. But
We
we're talking to a people, we're talking to a generation, we're talking about real life stuff that some people can't spiritualize, but they can definitely understand when we say that if you're not aligned, if you're not in agreement, then perhaps you should wait and think about it. So we know what to say spiritually. We got that. But what about the individual who may not be as spiritual as we are? How do we walk them through this process? Because it's a as you said, it's a complicated process, but I think sometimes we make it more complicated than it has to be. So sometimes we just ignore those red flags, right? We forsake the non-negotiables, and we just go into it because we want to be loved. We want to be in a relationship. We want to have spend time with someone, right? But we don't think about all that consists of. I mean, how many of us have really had counseling, or how many people over the age of 50 can you say really had counseling in terms of marriage, to understand what it means to be in a relationship, to be married?
I think even before we get there, we have to really look at the foundation of relationship. Relationship really begins back when we're infants. It's how we rely on the person who's a caregiver of us. How do they meet our everyday needs? And I think that's the development of it. And in some places where that's the development of it, there's some core things that we miss. So we don't begin to understand who we are from them. And if no one comes back and really tell us who we are as we begin to grow up in life, we really don't know who we are to enter into a relationship. And I think that's the basis for a lot of us. We enter into something because we see aspect of another person that we really desire for ourselves. And we feel as though if we become connected with that person, now we have certain aspects of that person when we don't. That person has that aspect. You don't.
Mm,
So I think it's a point that we really don't know who we are when we enter into relationships a lot of
that's
times.
good. That's real good. I like that. Pastor Collier, tell me what you think.
I agree in some of the instances of which our sis just spoke about, because if you don't know who you are, you will find yourself accepting or adopting anything, any type of standard, any type of methodology of doing things. And I think it's important that we have a clear understanding, a clear knowledge, a clear just clarity about who we are as a person, and clarity as to what we should accept, what we should not accept as a person, especially in relationships. Because we a lot of times tend to, if I may, a lot of times we tend to engage in relationships a lot of times without, you know, analyzing who the person is, or deep studying or getting information on who a person is, because I don't want to use the word desperate, but then I do want to use the word desperate.
Go ahead.
And when I say desperate, I'm talking about emotions.
Mhm.
I'm talking about lust, and that's not on the spiritual aspect. You know, we are just who we are as
Yeah.
humans. And a lot of times we're just longing to be loved, or longing to, a lot of times people don't realize that it's not even so much that they are longing to be loved, but a lot of times people just want attention. I just want
Mm.
somebody to pay attention to me. And so we take that and we don't really do the homework that we need to do to make sure that we are in alignment. Like something very simple as the person that you are engaging in is a Muslim and you are a Christian. So what happens when you become one? Or are you really one?
Mhm. Mhm. That's good. That's good, Rodney.
Well,
Pastor
I
Elder.
think I think that we're I think we're saying the same thing,
Mhm.
right? Our expectations. Let me just our expectations on what and how, as was stated, how we're raised, right? They shape and mold who we are as a
Yes.
person.
Right.
Everyone is not shaped and molded the same way.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
And what happens, I believe, and what I've experienced is the expectation of what we think is normal.
Mm,
And
Okay.
what happens in a relationship, it blows up right in our face
Mm.
because we're expecting that person to reciprocate the way we would reciprocate.
Mhm.
And they have no clue
wow.
because they weren't raised that way. They weren't shaped and formed and molded the same way we were.
Right.
If our values are different than
Right.
their values,
Mhm.
if our spirituality is different from their spirituality,
Mhm.
if they are raised disciplined,
Right.
then we're going to be expecting that person to be the same way, to be raised. Our expectation is that they were.
Right.
Right.
But when they come out and, as lack of a better term, just buck wild, we stand back and we're shocked.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Right.
we don't know how to accept that. We're thinking that this is supposed to be normal for us.
Right.
And it blows up in our face, and we don't know how to recover from that
Right.
because of our expectation is that everyone was raised the same way,
Right. Right.
and they weren't.
Right. So during that courtship period, then okay. So yes, we've established that we have different backgrounds and experiences and everything. Yet during that courtship period, whether it's 3 months or a year or however, you should be able to kind of detect that something's just not aligned. Am I wrong about that? Yet we go ahead anyway. And so from what you all are telling me, it's because regardless, we still want to be loved. We still want to be connected. We want to be in relationship. So even though we may not be aligned, we still feel that need to belong and to have someone that we can be intimate with and can develop a
That
relationship.
is the expectation
Okay.
that blows up.
Okay. All
I
right.
think that's what we don't allow ourselves, right? We don't allow ourselves to develop. How can I say? We don't mature in a relationship because it's unequally balanced. We're trying to move forward, and we can't because there's a weight that's dragging us down because of that expectation.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it becomes very difficult.
Okay.
Yes, and the things that it becomes like we're in a bad relationship where we're being abused and beaten up on every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't leave, and we stay because
Right.
of all of the things that we were saying. We don't want to be alone. We don't. We think that we can help that person. We can bring that person along. We can strengthen that person, but that person's not even willing. That person's not even thinking that way.
All right.
Th-
So let's talk about, I got you. I got you. So let's talk about ways that we are not aligned. And I want to just kind of go down a list because I think it's clear that sometimes we don't even know who we are and we're getting into a marriage. And so I want to speak for myself. When I married, I didn't know who I really was. And I'm thinking that a lot of people don't really know because over time you really develop, right?
That's
Mhm.
Who you
absolutely.
are. And your background informs you, your experiences, your career, and all that informs you. So you're on this journey, and then you realize that guess what? Something's out of place, something's not right. Intelligence, let's talk about intelligence. And my sister Patrice was talking about ways that we aren't. So let's talk up aren't necessarily aligned. What about intelligence? Should we be aligned with regard to intelligence? And intelligence can be a variety of things. It might be education wise, but it could be street smarts, it could be um, I don't know, common sense. Should couples be aligned with regard to intelligence?
Absolutely, I believe they should be. As far as if your goals, what are your expectations in the relationship? That's going to require some intelligence. Where do you see yourself? What type of person do you want to become? What type of person are you, and where do you want to achieve it or grow into?
So should you have the same degree? You know, should you marry someone who doesn't have a degree?
Well, if you're looking at classical education,
Right. So, I mean, education could be a variety of things. It could be
right.
street smarts. It could be common sense. It could be, yes, having that degree.
Well, if that's your goal and that's what you're expecting, absolutely, absolutely. That's going to cut down on hopefully, that's your expectation, right? That it's going to cut some of that journey in half as
Okay.
far as how I view my worldview and that person's worldview. So
Okay.
we're coming together, seeing the same things, understanding the same things. When we communicate, we're communicating the same way.
Okay. All right. What do you think, my sisters?
I think I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree. I think that it's an individual thing, and I'm taken for granted that you're saying that it's an individual thing because I can see someone who may not have a degree as high as my degree and still be married to them. So it doesn't mean that we are not aligned necessarily, but what it does give room for is growth as an individual, and we can still grow together because we're still coming from two totally different backgrounds. I don't care if you do have the same level of a degree that I have. It still doesn't make us the same individual because there's still something in my background, how I grew up, that's different than yours. I think one of the things that we miss is communication. I think communication is something that's important. Is it okay that we're not on the same level as far as education is concerned? And if it is, then what I'm basically saying is now I'm open to learn from you and you're open to deposit into me. So I think on those levels, it has to be an individual thing. Is that okay with you? And in some people, it is okay.
Okay. All right. Well, what about emotional? What about emotional alignment? Are you emotionally available?
To me, these um emotionalism and intellectualism and all of that, the items that you are given, to be honest, are something I never even thought about. So these are kind of, for me, tricky questions. Howbeit ever, I believe that intellectually, your intellect, your emotionalism, I'm kind of in agreement with my sis, because it's an individual thing. And I think that just because someone is not compatible to you, intellectually or even emotionally, with that communication, I just believe that you can enhance each other and help each
Exactly.
other to grow in those areas. Because if it's something that you have that I don't like, I need to communicate that to you,
Yes.
and you need to communicate that to me. And this is how a marriage, it may not be in alignment, because we don't think of everything. Like I said, I didn't even think of these things when I got married. And so I missed it. But when you communicate, and you talk about what you like and what you don't like, then you are able to work on those areas. That's just my point of view.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay. Rodney?
Yeah.
Okay. So before you
It's
respond, let me just say that, and this is really important to me, this emotional uh, piece, because and we talk about communication, but if someone is not emotionally available,
That's different.
if they are not emotionally open, if they are not emotionally vulnerable, they will not communicate.
Exactly.
Amen.
It's not going to happen, no matter how
not gonna
much
happen.
you want it to happen. So if you're engaged in a conversation and you're getting one word responses, or indifference, uh, or not able to communicate fluidly, or talk about life, that's going to be a challenge.
It is.
So
It's a
when
very
we
big
talk about
challenge.
being emotionally vulnerable, emotionally available, I think that really does hinge on communication.
It does.
Because if you aren't able to open up, you're not going to be able to communicate.
Right.
I mean, do you agree with that, or maybe I'm missing it?
No, I think that you're spot on. Um, when we talk about the things, we you can't minimize um, a person's intellect, okay? Because that makes that person either vulnerable, or that makes that person shy away and hide. That person has to be comfortable around certain environments. Um, they have to be comfortable in their skin. They have to be able, if I was the president of the United States and were just a regular person, would you feel comfortable around certain environments? No,
Mm,
you wouldn't be comfortable sitting around dignitaries, having intellectual, political, geopolitical conversation, because
Why
that's out
wouldn't
of
you?
your wheelhouse.
I,
What? Oh, so you're saying, so who are you talking to, though? Who are you talking about? You talking about?
Just in general, just
Well,
in
no,
general.
I have to disagree with you, because
okay.
people don't necessarily have to be a president of the United States to be able to talk geopolitical, or be
But
able.
what I'm saying, the point that I'm making, when we
Okay,
were saying, it doesn't matter about your education, things like that, it does. It does, because it becomes intimidating to some people.
okay,
And if that person's intimidated, then they're going to shut down.
okay,
They're not going to be open and vulnerable
okay.
because
So
they're going to be embarrassed.
Okay,
That's
so
why we said it's an individual thing. So
Mm.
that might be okay for you. Using your example, my comfortability would come from my mate and not from my surroundings. That makes a difference. I don't have a problem with someone who has higher education than I do and being in the presence of his dignitaries. My comfortability comes from the person who's my mate, not from where we're going. So I think it depends on who you are as an individual. If you're okay with that, and it doesn't minimize me, it doesn't make me feel any type of way because your education is greater. It's how
But
we communicate one with another. It's how we receive one with another. It's how we talk with one with another. That's more important to me than the outside community, the
mm,
outside
I don't
surrounding.
minimize that. I agree with that. I agree, but everybody doesn't. Their view
That's why I
is
say
not the
individual.
same, and it
That's what
makes it
we're saying.
difficult. So if I'm that person and you're not that person, as
Then
you
there's
say
no
you are,
attraction.
you're depending upon your mate to establish who you are, then that person's going to have that issue, right?
mm,
But I think she was,
Because
and
they're
that's good.
afraid, they're
okay,
not depending on that person. They're
I
looking at themselves as an individual and who they are, not who that mate is.
But I don't think I would be attractive to somebody like that. It's all about what you're attracted to. It's all about what you desire. And those things you pick up in the dating process. Those things you pick up in the process of when we're getting to know one another. Certain things like that wouldn't attract me to you. It wouldn't give me further conversation in
mhm,
that realm. There's some things
Mhm.
that we overlook as being triggers. There's some things that we overlook because we only seeing what we desire. So then that falls back on us as an individual. If
mhm,
the person I'm getting to know, if they're withdrawing emotionally and I pick that up in a relationship, and if it's something I cannot handle, I don't think I would enter into a marriage with them because I
mm.
can't even handle it while we're together in a relationship. If you're turning me off, then if I just can't deal with it, and if I'm just stressed out, and I'm not sure, and especially where I'm at now, the age that I am at now, the maturity level that I have now, I, I wouldn't
If
do
I
it.
can,
You can do.
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
Pastor Collier, go ahead. Go ahead.
If I could be transparent, I was in a relationship. Well, not even I was in a marriage actually. And before we got married, intellectually, I thought he was awesome. I thought he was so smart. I thought, I'm like, I'm marrying my father pretty much. And even emotionally, he gave me all of that while we were dating. But when we got married,
That's the
three
difference.
months into after being married, he was like, I only married you because of your last name, because of who your father was. He said, you don't have it. I started finding out who the real husband was, who I really married. He said, you
Mhm,
don't have an education, you're not a college person, you're not this, you're not that. And I wanted to, and I'm like, why did you marry me? But the crazy part is I stayed for 28 years. I'm done.
okay. I love you. Well,
Can I ask a
this
question,
is so.
Tanya? Can I
This
ask
is
a
Yes,
question?
yes.
Why did you stay for 28 years?
I think it was, and I don't want to blame our parents. I think it was the way we were brought up. You don't leave your husband, you don't let people know what's going on in your family. And when I finally decided to start telling people, because I am a domestic violence survivor. So when I started to finally tell people what was going on, they said, well, okay, I know what your parents and them taught you, but are you going to stay there until he kill you? So it started making me think, okay, I need to get out of here, because if I keep getting beat, one day it's possible that I may not even make it out alive.
Yeah.
So that made me stay. And then the other thing is, of course, when you're having children, you be like, your children need a father figure. Your children need a family. And what people had started telling me, who I started opening up to, were saying, they were saying, your home is already dysfunctional. Your home is already messed up. Your children are already messed up. And I'm glad I started listening because till this day, my children are jacked up in their minds, their heads. It's crazy. But and the thing about what I'm dealing with right now is trying to not blame me, but I am part of the blame because
Let,
I stayed there as long as I did.
yeah. And you know what, sis, I love you for sharing that. And I know you've
Yeah.
shared it in the past, but I want to just comment and say that those who are over the age of 50 were taught the very same thing.
Yes.
And it wasn't until either the light goes off or you
Right.
decide that on or you decide that you're just going to be a rebel, that
Exactly.
you make that move and do what you need to do, because teachings like that are just so ingrained in you that if you feel condemned when you don't.
Mhm.
But I am so happy that you're sharing this,
Mhm.
because many of us don't realize who we've married until we've married.
Yeah.
That's true too.
And it's unfortunate. And if we were to court for perhaps 10 years, we still may not know who the person is that we've married.
Yeah.
And so this is the point that I want to make right now. And the point is that we're talking about relationship being aligned, and we could go on down the line in terms of readiness, in terms of physicality and chemistry and all that stuff. But what about being spiritually aligned
Mm.
with God, just with Him? Because I think that if we were spiritually aligned with Him, then we wouldn't marry the people that we marry. That longing to be with someone, to belong, to be relationship would not have happened whatsoever, because we would have waited.
I agree
Mhm.
110%.
And the
Mhm.
fact that we weren't, and I'm being transparent,
Absolutely.
I felt the need for some odd reason to just get married. I graduated college, and all of a sudden this I gotta get married overtook me.
Yes.
And I gotta get married to someone in the church because I don't want to be unequally yoked.
Right.
But guess what?
Yeah.
You can be unequally yoked with a believer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the church today isn't saying that,
Right.
because if you're a believer, you must be equally yoked because you're a believer. But that's not the case.
Mhm.
But if we are divinely aligned with God, before we say yes, before we walk down the aisle, chances are we won't, because God will have moved us out of the way, spared us a lot of what we've gone through. And I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true.
Listen. Yeah.
It's not a hard pill to swallow. It's a reality.
Yeah. Reality.
What everything that was stated, those that are 50 and above, what we were taught was our detriment.
Mm.
It it did not help us.
Right.
It did not help us because we parroted, we heard parroting, things that were never explained. As you stated, being aligned with God is the most important thing. It's everything. Having the communion with God is the most. Our lives depend upon our relationship with God,
Mhm.
and He's not going to allow us to just falter. It's going to be perfect. Everything that He does is perfect. When He created man and woman, He created them perfect. So there was no room. But what we did and what we heard without any explanation, without any teaching properly discussed, telling us what we should be doing and how we're supposed to be aligned. was never the case. As you stated, Ron, I had the same. I was like, okay, I got saved, so I got to get married.
Yeah.
And that was, that was it. And I'm thinking, oh, well, the husband has sanctified the wife and, all of this foolishness. Because that's what it was. It was scripture out of context. It was pretext. And we parroted it and we believed it to our detriment. And we got in trouble.
You got in
And then
trouble.
we say, well, what am I supposed to do now?
Right.
I mean, because I know I'm not the only person that said that.
Right.
What am I supposed to do now?
Great segue. Great segue. Okay. So Genesis 2 and 24 and Matthew 19 and 5. Okay. It specifically instructs. So we're in the situation. Prayerfully, we'll be aligned before we make that decision. Prayerfully, we'll ask God to take away the feelings that we have that are not like him, and we'll forego making that decision until the right person comes. But what do we do when we're in it? So the one flesh is what Jesus talks about, and Genesis 2 and 24 talks about. But it specifically speaks to the man, specifically speaks to the husband, and says, husbands, I want you to leave your mother and your father, and I want you to cleave to your wife. Okay. So this is for the men who may be listening, because there's a responsibility that they have, right?
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't women, and I would think that as a woman, we're cleave, we like to cleave, right? I would think he would say to the woman, but no, he says to the man to cleave to the wife so that you're one flesh. What does this say then to those relationships, to the marriage where it's not aligned? Is there hope? Is there hope when we look at Genesis 2 and Matthew 19? Is there any restoration? Patrice, I want to hear from you. I've got.
Let my brother go first, since you said it was to the men. I'm a yield to you first.
I just felt like it was something you thought you wanted to say, but okay, all right, I'll leave it to Rodney. Go ahead.
The scripture teaches us, okay, how can two walk together except they be agreed? Then the scripture tells us and teaches us how that we should be yoked. And when we're yoked and we always see the unequally part as being bad. But the unequally part of being yoked together represents strength.
Okay.
One of the oxen has to be stronger than the other in order to teach the weaker oxen how to plow straight. God placed that responsibility on the man.
Okay.
The onus, as you stated, why did he tell him to cleave? Because the scripture teaches us that he was the stronger vessel. And he tells us how we're supposed to treat the weaker vessel. God is the stronger vessel. He teaches us, the weaker vessel, how we're supposed to align ourselves spiritually with him. And likewise, the scripture says in Ephesians, and this was the mystery.
Okay. So just
Can we go back?
Just come on, because it's out here. I want to bring it,
Yeah.
the application. So what are you saying? What are you saying? I just want to. How do we do this?
If the man is aligned with God,
Okay.
then he's going to align the weaker vessel because she is also aligned with him. As we've already indicated and stated, God has given me this vessel. She's in agreement. We're walking together. God is the stronger vessel. We're looking for him and his cues, not my cues, but we're looking for his cues so that we will plow the row straight.
But I thought, and help me out. I thought that a yoke was a wooden plow that joins two oxes together. I
It
also
is.
thought that the two oxen had to be equal in strength, because if
Mm-hmm.
you weren't be able to plow together. It's an alignment thing when they use the word yoke. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that that's what it meant. It's an alignment. So if
It's an
you're not
alignment.
aligned in it,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have the same strength, then one is not going to be able, the board or the wooden board is not going to be leveled for you guys to be able to plow in
But
the
what?
area
Mm-hmm.
together.
But
So
what we don't.
I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
women and men. I'm not saying in that. I'm just looking at when you said that when you plow together, a yoke means that one has to be stronger than the other. Is that what
In
you were saying?
in the beginning, in the beginning, when you have two strong-willed oxen, one's going to chafe
True.
because he wants to pull his way. The other ox wants to pull that way. So what they do, they get two oxen, one stronger, one weaker, and they yoke them together so that the stronger one shows the weaker one how to plow. And as they grow together, they become stronger as one unit.
So you're saying that's the answer to Rhonda. I even forgot what your question was.
Right. So,
To
so
being aligned,
we're one flesh. So
one
we get
flesh.
married. We may not be completely aligned, right? But
Mhm,
we're commanded to be one flesh, right? And
mhm,
so the husband is supposed to cleave to his wife
mhm.
so that that oneness is complete, that we fulfill God's command for oneness. And so, Rodney, you're creating this illustration about the oxen.
Okay.
And so, what you're saying is that the husband is the stronger vessel, and we're only talking in terms of strength,
Mhm.
obviously. And because he is stronger, he is the leader, and you are pulling this. I'm just trying to paraphrase. And so you're bringing along your wife, and then together you become one because you find that equilibrium, you
That is
find that
correct.
oneness.
And that's correct.
Okay.
Because because the yoke is so that they're together, so that they can't wander off. And
Okay.
they're moving in the same direction
All right.
with the same intent and the same purpose. And see,
Okay.
I think sometimes what we forget is our purpose
Okay.
and
Before
what the
you,
purpose
okay.
of the relationship,
Uh-huh.
right, is to be one,
One.
one flesh.
Right.
Okay, not two individuals, but one flesh,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so when we see two oxen plowing together, they're uniform, they're in stride, step by step, moving in the same direction with power and with strength.
Okay. And how is that accomplished? How is that accomplished? If you realize, so the question was, if you realize you're not aligned, how do you get aligned? So you gave us the illustration.
Hmm.
How
So
does
that
this happen practically speaking?
practically speaking, there is a process of submission from both individuals. We have to submit. And I mean, Ephesians teaches us this. It
Okay, so
tells us to
submission.
submit. And what
Okay.
happens, we take that word submission and look at it as subservient.
No,
No.
no, I don't
We
think.
look at it as being
No.
submissive to one another. We see the need. If they're weak in a certain area, then that person has to submit and allow that other person to help them
Okay.
and not be strong willed, because when you're strong willed, you're chafing. That yoke is going to rub and it's going to cause the
Friction.
skin to become irritated, become sore, okay, and probably even bleed out if you're going to continue to pull and to do your own thing. So
Pastor,
the whole
Pastor, what do you think? What do you believe? What are you saying in terms of what this discussion is leading us? Tell us.
It's such a vast topic. Submission is definitely the key. But when you're submitting to your wife, or whether you're submitting to your husband, my mind I'm stuck at what exactly are you submitting to? That's where I'm at. Although you are supposed to be submissive, the husband is the head of the home, but what are you submitting to? And so if you're submitting to someone who is toxic, for instance, is that alignment? So while you're talking, my head is just everywhere.
Mhm.
And I know we are supposed to be submissive to the one that has head over us, as supposedly God is the head over him.
Mhm.
But dude got issues. And I'm not saying that because I'm not healed from my marriage. I'm saying that because it's reality.
Right.
Mhm.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's
I,
right.
I and I understand that,
That's
okay,
right.
and I'm not dismissing that. All things being considered, we're aligned now,
Okay.
okay?
Well,
We're
no, we're
aligned
not aligned.
because
We're
what
not
we
aligned.
have to
No.
understand, okay, when we talk about being aligned,
Yes.
we're in our purpose, okay? What God created us for, not abusive, okay, not being toxic,
But wait a minute.
okay.
Wait. The issue here is that you're making an assumption.
What isn't being aligned assumption?
Right. But what I'm saying is that it's not as simple as you're making it out to be.
Right.
It's not
Okay,
that simple.
okay, so okay, then let's take the spirituality out of it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because
Okay,
if
all
one of
right, so
you
we're gonna go
feel
this with where the rubber hits the road. Okay, we're in a jacked up relationship, then, right?
Yeah,
There is no alignment.
exactly.
that's true.
So in that case, run,
Okay.
because no, I'm being very transparent, because
Okay.
it's not gonna get better.
Okay.
It's not gonna get better because of that simple fact that that person in that relationship is not willing to submit. Neither one is going to submit because for whatever reason, it's toxic, it's dangerous, it's there's all types of emotions that are plaguing, you know, ego, will, all of these things that make relationships bad.
Can I?
Personalities, who
Yeah.
that person may think they are. They're it's their ego.
Right.
So if we're talking about being aligned, you can never be aligned with a toxic person unless you're toxic.
Okay. All right. Patrice. Patrice.
Yes.
Yes. Tell us something.
I understand what you're saying. And when we say take spirituality out of it, I guess my question is, and I appreciate you, sis, in your story. You have encouraged me on today, as far as I'm sure you have encouraged so many women that are on the line, because everybody doesn't have the boldness really to state what you stated. And it's important for this
Yeah.
day and time. But when we talk about taking the spirituality out of it, it does not necessarily mean that every relationship is toxic.
Right.
There are relationships that don't have a spiritual aspect to them that are good relationships.
Completely.
So I think I understand what you're
I
saying.
disagree with that.
Okay. So I have family members who's been married for 30, 40, and 50 years
Hmm.
who are not with Christ. Their relationships is good. As far as I can see, I'm not going to go to their house and say, well, let me sit on your couch and ask you. But you also have relationships that are in the body of Christ that are just relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that because you're married 30, 40, 50, 60, 20, or 10 years that you have a loving and a healthy relationship. I
Mm-hmm.
think it goes back to individuality and what we need in relationship. I don't think there is just one covenant that says a relationship is governed this way, because I may not be that individual that you're speaking about in a relationship. I think we have to deal with relationship on an individual level. I agree with the submission. I agree with the Bible says. I'm not taking it out that the Bible doesn't say that. I agree with the Bible. I agree with God, what God is trying to do, because I belong to him. So I follow what he says. But I'm also real when it comes to relationships. You know, I believe when you talk about one flesh, we're talking about a total merging of two lives together to create one. In church, a lot of times they say that I'm half and you half and we're creating one. No, we're two lives that are coming together in one unit. We're two lives that are forming something that's interdependent in an entity. We're not, I'm not a half a person. I am a whole person that comes together with another whole person, that we create a dependency one with another together. We follow under God's umbrella. Now, we have done it wrong. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I've done it right in my relationship. In my relationship, in my marriage, I was wrong and he was wrong. It wasn't just one person is wrong. It took two of us to make it, and it takes two of us to tear it down. I just believe that I was young then. I'm more mature now. I don't see things in the same perspective than I did when I got married when I was 21.
Yeah.
I don't see things. I've grown. He has grown. Does that make it that we're bad? It just makes it that we're not for each other. Right. And I think sometimes we have to understand that, and we have to be willing to accept that. Doesn't mean that we have the best relationship, but you have to understand who you are.
Right. That's good.
And that's just what I believe.
Good.
Doesn't mean I didn't submit, because that most definitely was not the situation. Doesn't mean that he didn't submit to me. It's other things that could have transpired in there that happened. Yeah. And sometimes you have to look at things and say, things happen.
So I from what I'm taking from, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm taking from it, we're looking at a broad view and a narrow view of relationships. Because if we're looking at a narrow view, then we're looking at toxicity and various things like that. A broader view is we're looking at purpose. As you stated, you have individuals, family members that are not uh, believers, I guess a term, Christians or whatever, that are together, and they vibe together. God created us that way. We're spirit beings. So when we in a broad sense, we're spirit beings. We're all spirit beings. Whether we're saved or not has nothing to do with it. We're spirit beings. He breathed life into us. We're God's creatures. He wants us to be in relationship with him, so it makes us spirit beings. So, and that's in a broad sense. But in a narrow sense, yes, in relationships that are bad, we need to get out of.
But I think that's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
You know, you're saying it
I
like they
agree
can
with
just
that.
jump out today or tomorrow. But literally, I think sometimes when we're on platforms of that, we have to be careful of the words that proceed out of our mouth, because people latch onto every word that we say. They just can't go back home, and when their husband or their wife going to say, listen, this is toxic, I'm leaving. There is a process, as our sister said it to us. Some people cannot do that. Some people look onto this individual as being their livelihood. She had children, she had this. It's a mindset that you need to have when it's time to leave.
exactly. And
If I
I
can,
agree.
go
I
ahead.
yes,
agree with that.
Pastor Collier, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that. Another thing was every eye was on us. My husband was a pastor, and I was a first lady. So I definitely had to be careful. I felt like, first of all, I felt like I was the pastor of the people because they always came to me, and then I just had to be very careful because I didn't want no blood on my hands on the way I left. So I'm gonna say that because I know we got to close, but I
Yes,
just
yes,
wanted to add that.
right. So, and I'm telling you, I wish we had a whole nother hour to talk about this, but we don't. But where I was trying to go with this, with the question about the one flesh and the husband's responsibility, was really trying to drive home the point that whether you are a Christian or not, there is an onus on the leader. I think no matter what culture you're from, the head is generally speaking the husband, the
Yeah.
man. And so there's this responsibility to do all you can to make the relationship work.
Right.
And it's not possible if, of course, the head is not aligned. And he doesn't necessarily have to be aligned with Christ, because as
Right.
Patrice said, there are couples. I mean, we hear about celebrities who've been married for 40, 50 years.
Hmm.
They don't know Christ, but I guarantee you that the head is the husband, because there's this understanding in our culture, in America, in the world, that heads lead. And so regardless, that there is a responsibility to try to bring the family, to bring this oneness together. But obviously, if there's a problem with the head, that's not going to happen.
That's
Right.
correct.
And if
Yeah.
the head isn't working right, as Pastor said, the whole family will be dysfunctional. And
That's
that's the
right.
sadness of this whole story,
Yeah.
that this responsibility to lead and to make sure that everyone is aligned is the responsibility of the leader. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And sometimes, as a result of that, women do have to make decisions. But I don't want anyone to listen to this talk and feel as though they're going home and they're going to leave their spouse. That whatever you do, you
Mm.
must get counsel,
Yeah.
and you must pray and ask God for direction. And I
Absolutely.
think that many of us have stayed in the relationships that we've stayed in for a variety of reasons, and many of the reasons Pastor Collier's already stated. And because there are repercussions. You've been in this relationship for a long time, and the very nature of women is to nurture, to support,
Right.
to be there. And so it's not easy for us to disconnect like that. We just
Mhm.
can't do that. Um, but we want to be in the will of God. We want to be pleasing to God. We want to live a life that He wants, but we also have to live a life where we have some semblance of peace, of joy, of liberty. And as a result of that, often we have to make the decision to leave. I'm praying that we'll have a part two, because we've done an excellent job talking about this, and I think that it's great having you, Rodney, on board, because you're sharing
Yes.
from a perspective that most women wouldn't be able to identify with, simply because we are women. So I think that having you a part of the discussion is invaluable.
Yes.
But I want to give Pastor Collier and Rodney and Patrice, Evangelist Patrice, the opportunity to say one more word before we end the talk. Pastor Collier.
I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me. And this was such a great topic, and it gave me something to think about because I'm getting ready to do a counseling for a marriage to be. And
Yes.
certainly I learned some aspects of things that I had not even thought about when I got married to make sure I incorporate in this counseling. So thank you. And it's good seeing everyone. Rodney, it's good to see you. Pastor Patrice, it's nice meeting you.
You too.
Wonderful. Rodney, I'm going to let you speak next.
Thank you, Rhonda, for the invite, and I enjoyed the panel. It was enlightening. I feel a little outnumbered here, but my shoulders are broad enough to take it.
I know.
I can handle it.
I know.
I mean, I think the views of women are important because sometimes we don't see everything. We don't see everything, and I definitely don't see everything, and I don't want to know everything. But one thing that my mother used to say, what I do know, I know the pieces. So again, I thank you, for the invite, and this was very inspirational.
Wonderful. Evangelist Patrice.
Once again, I want to say also that I appreciate being on this panel this evening, and the information, even from you, Rodney, was extremely valuable. I love to
Thank
hear
you.
a man's point of view and everything that we say, because I believe that women and men see things in two totally different ways, but yet we can come together and agree. But one thing I do want to say is that when a relationship is healthy, it promotes emotional and social wellness. And when a relationship is unhealthy, it's draining, it's
Yes.
overwhelming, and it's invisible. The person feels, or the people feel invisible in a relationship. I think we have to take that into consideration when we're dealing with relationships. And most of all, as I say always, to thy own self be true. Know who you are and know what you're bringing into a relationship, and know when the relationship, if that person is enhancing you, which is a big thing, because sometimes we go in a relationship and there's no enhancement, but we stay there. So I think it's valuable for us to understand components about ourselves before we enter into anything. We got to get to know who we are, and that's all.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to put one tag on that, and that would be know who we are and make sure that we seek God's face
Yes.
for the next season of our lives, because we have more time behind us than we do in front of
In
us.
front of us.
And so we want to make sure that we're doing it right. Thank you all so very much. And I do think we just need to do a number 2 of this. But thank you so very much for all of your comments. It means so much to me. And I'm sure that this is going to be a blessing. I'm hoping everyone who views this will be blessed by it. Thank you all again so much. All right. And Merry Christmas and a
Very
happy,
good.
Merry
blessed
Christmas.
New Year. Amen.
God
All right.
bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.